Okay, we are rolling. Champions of Champions Boxing Talk is back, brother. Right. A pretty good contest, shall we say, in the UK is coming up on ITV Box Office. And that is James DeGale v Chris Eubank Jr. What do I think about this fight? Well, two polarising figures, shall we say, in boxing for different reasons. Chris Eubank seems to carry himself as though he owns the world. Tries to sort of embody the same persona that his father had. James DeGale, does seem a confident kind of figure. Sometimes seems a bit of a complacent kind of figure. There's something in this fight which is very frustrating. There's one fighter in this fight that is very frustrating. And that's Chris Eubank. Chris Eubank Jr., you forgive all of Adrian Broner's mistakes when you see Chris Eubank Jr. People forget when they criticise Adrian Broner. He has been a champion in 4 weight classes. Like him or lump him, he has been a champion. A world champion. Not an IBO champion. A real, legitimate, major world champion in 4 weight classes. How he got there, this, that and the other, the facts are he has been a major world champion. His Achilles heels has always been activity. It isn't there, right? It's just something that evades Adrian Broner. He doesn't throw enough punches in bunches. He's got the quality of punch, but not the volume of punch. Maybe the stamina issues there. And sometimes stamina, you either have it or you don't. People say that this guy doesn't work hard, that guy doesn't work hard. Maybe some people just are what they are, and we have to accept it. Chris Eubank is the UK version of Adrian Broner, but a far more frustrating figure. Why? Adrian Broner at least has some fundamentals. A good defence. To me, he does have a decent jab. He has a good ring IQ. There are things Adrian Broner has that if you could put them on Chris Eubank Jr., you would have a fantastic fighter. Chris Eubank Jr.'s background has been criticised, and been described as a reason why he has failed thus far at the top level v Billy Joe Saunders and George Groves. I don't think that's the reason. You know why? Usually the very comfortable, rich people don't really want to get outside and do, the heavy work and the grind. Right? They would rather have the fundamentals, rather have the fancy stuff. But with Chris Eubank, it's the absolute opposite. He has no problem doing the runs. He has no problem hitting a heavy bag till kingdom come. He has no problem being in terrific shape. He has no problem getting in the fire, in the trenches, and letting his hands go. He has no problem being in the position where he could potentially take a shot, a big shot. And yet, he neglects fundamentals. Right? I picked Chris Eubank Jr. to beat George Groves. But I was imagining things that Chris Eubank didn't have. Am I going to put myself in the same position again? Despite me believing that perhaps James DeGale's best days are beyond him, I don't know, hand on heart, if I can pick Eubank. I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know, and he's got a new coach, if he has developed anything fundamentally. Chris Eubank tends to throw wild uppercuts, wild swinging shots, wide shots that leaves himself wide open. He tends to, I don't know, he seems to freeze on the big occasion. And he seems to be recklessly taking punches when he's just coming forward. You see, James DeGale, he's lost fights to George Groves, but he's bounced back and won world titles. Right? But there's always a moment, the Medina fight, for instance. Medina, an aggressor, troubled James DeGale. James DeGale made a fast start against Bodu Jack, but the pressure of Bodu Jack got him back into the fight. James DeGale dropped Bodu Jack, right? James DeGale lost recently to Truax. Against hard-working, grafting pressure fighters, James DeGale, to me, makes a good start. But he fades as the fight goes on against these guys. The difference is these guys have more fundamentals than a Chris Eubank. They do. Chris Eubank, if he could do what Truax did, for instance, how he would make life a lot easier for himself in this fight is if he would use a double jab to close the space down, put a high guard up, defend himself responsibly, attack, and then move out of range before a guy can respond back. That would give Chris Eubank a massive chance, not only against James DeGale, it would knit a lot of his natural abilities together. He would be able to show the world his volume, his tenacity, strength, and so forth, rather than just being picked off because he lacks fundamentals. You know, moving the head, not leaving a chin high. You know, things like he can take a punch. And he's needed to at times. You know. But there are so many things. But I just don't know if Chris Eubank Jr., who is now in his late 20s, will possess these traits. I just can't be certain of it. Yet again, his work rate, his willingness to get in the fight is the sort of style that does trouble James DeGale. But, of course, with that style, the other guys have had, you know, tremendous talents and fundamentals, like a double jab, like persistent movement of a head, say, like Medina did when he constantly gave James DeGale trouble with body shots. Right? Slowed James DeGale down systematically to make that fight a lot closer than what the judges scored it. George Groves was willing to get to the fight with James DeGale, but James DeGale held his own, even though he lost that fight to George Groves. And he did come back against Truax. Again, the second fight for me was a close one. That could have gone either way. But he performed better in the rematch than he did in the first Truax fight, where he was absolutely outgunned James DeGale. He took some hellacious punishment. He did late on against Bodu Jack when his teeth was knocked out. See, the thing with James DeGale, he makes a good start, and I don't know whether it's a stamina issue, a concentration issue, but he tends to get pulled in to the aggressor's fight. But as I said, does Chris Eubank even have the wits to pull James DeGale into that fight? James DeGale sometimes helps because he goes there himself. But even if he does go there himself come Saturday night, does Chris Eubank have, again, the smarts to do it? I don't know. What do you guys think? This is the question. James DeGale, really, right now, he should be for the taking. But I think still he's got the edge in this fight. That's just where I'm coming from. All the stuff Chris Eubank has said is true, but is he the guy that can apply what the other guys have done? Because I think if you'd have got a Medina as you had back then against James DeGale now, Medina may beat him. Right? Bodu Jack may beat him. George Groves, who knows how that fight would go had he not retired. Callum Smith, I think, with his pressure, particularly being such a tall man and being so good for a tall man on the inside, could maybe do the job and beat James DeGale now. But I can't trust Chris Eubank. Here's another thing with Chris Eubank. George Groves had an injured shoulder and he couldn't finish George Groves with one arm. He's fighting a guy that can fight in James DeGale with speed, accuracy. James DeGale does have good ring IQ. He has good feet until he decides to square up, hang around on the ropes too much, get drawn into another guy's strategy rather than his own. And I believe James DeGale can switch. He's a switch hitter. He has all the advantages, James DeGale, providing he just uses that brain. But he's been dragged into so many wars recently that I think it's becoming habit. But again, he may be fighting the right guy for that habit, because Eubank, with just them swings, James DeGale might be able to just see it coming and be able to pick him off, even in the trenches. Size as well. Is Chris Eubank Jr. really a middleweight? I'm not sure. He is a middleweight, sorry. Is he a super middleweight, 168 pounder? I'm not sure. George Groves, who was not, George was more finesse, wasn't he? Great, accurate puncher, good combination puncher, low volume, but very accurate. He was a master of finesse. Good power too. Wasn't really a Carl Froch in terms of strength, or a Callum Smith. George Groves was not that. But he seems to be able to hold his own physically with Chris Eubank. In fact, until the injury, he was out muscling at times. Chris Eubank Jr. If he could do it, James DeGale can do it. And as I say, there are problems. James DeGale could fight. Is Chris Eubank, sophisticated enough to deal with one moment a orthodox stance and then a southpaw stance? Will he be hurt for the first time, really hurt at this weight? Because James DeGale has dropped world-class opponents early in his fight. He dropped Bodu Jack, right? Bodu Jack has some whiskers on him. James DeGale dropped him early. Bodu Jack went up to light heavyweight and beat Nathan Cleverly. Destroyed him. Didn't destroy James DeGale. Right, okay, James DeGale come undone a little bit late on. But Bodu Jack knew he was in a contest there. And this is a Bodu Jack that beat George Groves. James DeGale again v. Durrell. When he won the world title. He had him down multiple times. That is a super middleweight he dropped there. I know, again, he come back into the fight because, again, James DeGale's strategy seemed to go flying in the stars for some reason, as it generally does. He comes undone. He does. But Durrell, George Groves, Bodu Jack, Medina, they all have better fundamentals than Chris Eubank Jr. It's just the way it is. James DeGale has all the advantages. Size, skill, hand speed I think is even quicker. Father Time is the only friend of Chris Eubank in this fight. The Chris Eubank we've seen so far. If that trainer, the new trainer of Chris Eubank, can bring some more fundamentals, add at least some. A double jab, a jab to the stomach, a method, all the power to him. But do I trust this to happen? No. It is again similar to 29-year-old Adrian Broner v 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao. Adrian Broner should have the edge. But we couldn't trust him, could we? Because he just would, not compete in terms of fire with Manny Pacquiao. And it's not just Pacquiao. It's smaller guys like Mikey Garcia beat Adrian Broner. You know, Adrian Broner did not turn up against Pacquiao, a different fighter. He said he was, just like Chris Eubank is saying he's going to turn up a different fighter against James DeGale. The problem Adrian Broner faced was Pacquiao can't stick to a game plan, and if it's working, he'll just stay there. The advantage, the hope for Chris Eubank is James DeGale can be winning and somehow give you a chance. Play into your hands. Pacquiao won't do that. But still, Adrian Broner said all the right things. Chris Eubank said all the right things. But when similar age to Adrian Broner, can he now become a slightly different fighter, a better model than he was before? I'm not so sure. I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I will be delighted for him because, as I said, he is, and I do like James DeGale too. I think he's been a real good fighter for British boxing. Let's give credit where it's due. Very sharp, real sharp at his best. Tenacious. Has bounce back ability. When he's lost, he's answered the call, hasn't he? And returned. But Chris Eubank, to me, that what I do like about him, considering he is from wealth, and he is fortunate to be the son of a multimillionaire, what I do like about him is you could put that boy in a factory and he would work 12 hours. He would. The guy is a grafter. He literally trains like a demon. There's no cardiovascular work left unturned. All that hill work is ticked. I've seen it. All the pads, the sparring, on point. But yet, he will always be a labourer because he won't read the information to reach management level. When he does have the wealth to reach management level. He has so much confidence in his fitness that he's forgot to develop talent. Method, ring IQ. At times he comes forward like a tank and just receives, and misses and swings and gets desperate. But there's no quitting the boy. That is what I really admire about him. I just wish that the penny would drop. Because the speed, the volume and all the stuff, there's some potential there. Somebody, if they can access and install the right software, bingo. He has at least potential to be as good as Truax and Medina, people like that. Of course he does. With a few fundamentals, I know it. But do I trust it to happen this weekend? Personally, I'm slightly leaning towards James DeGale again. Because as I said, James DeGale may be on the final stretch of his career, but so was George Groves. And he managed to beat Chris Eubank Jr. Why couldn't James DeGale? Confidence-wise, James DeGale won the title back against Truax. He's coming off a win. But to me, I don't know. That George Groves defeat is still very fresh. And unlike the Billy Joe Saunders fight, it was similar in terms of pattern. Eubank was major rounds down. 4 or 5 rounds down before he knew it. George Groves the same. But I could see that the punches of George Groves at super middleweight was hurting Chris Eubank a little bit more than Billy Joe Saunders at middleweight. Again, because Chris Eubank, James DeGale said it about Chris Eubank himself, that he is a warrior. If he can keep the lights switched on, he will carry on fighting. You've got to put his lights out to stop him trying to fight. But that little bit of cunningness that all the elite fighters have and need to become champions is missing. Will it turn up Saturday night? I'm betting it won't. And I would be delighted if I was wrong. Not because, again, I dislike James DeGale. I like James DeGale. But we would have a guy right at his physical peak. A new big name at 168 pounds. And the beauty of boxing is seeing fighters develop. We then know that a guy that has come from mediocrity at times has finally bridged the gap and got a marquee win on his record. Right? We're still waiting for that, really, with Adrian Broner and Chris Eubank. Well, Adrian Broner does have. But, you know, Adrian Broner... It's frustration with both these guys in their own way. But Chris Eubank makes Adrian Broner look you know, you're not frustrated with Adrian Broner once you watch Chris Eubank Jr. Difference is, I think Adrian Broner gets the fundamentals right, but he wouldn't do the work that Chris Eubank would do. If you could morph both these guys together, you'd have a very good fighter indeed. But they lack what each other lack, if that makes sense. So for me, I see James DeGale maybe taking a majority decision in this fight on points. I see him being dragged in there once again, but Chris Eubank not having the accuracy and swinging with shots rather than looking compact with shots, if you understand what I mean. Too much length when they should be shortened. And getting fatigued by sometimes trying to do too much. If that makes sense. Sometimes less is more. You know, when you've got a guy hurt in a boxing fight, sometimes that's the sign to slow down and pick your shots. Not speed up. But I know he's the type that would speed up. We shall wait and see. Right? But anyway, James DeGale, I think, takes one last hurrah and beats Chris Eubank Jr. He's not getting past the Callum Smith or anything like that, James DeGale, right now. That I don't believe. But this fight, he has the chance because the guy in front of him believes so strongly in what Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. The sign of utter insanity. He'll find opponents that he can do that against and win at C level. But when you reach in B and A level and elite, it's not going to work. So stop being insane and get them fundamental specs on. You're going to need them. Well, you have to need them, but I don't think he's going to have them this weekend. I think he's going to fall slightly short again. It'll be a little closer than the Groves and Saunders fights because I think James DeGale has seen better days, but still I think he's just about got enough to see victory through. So a win, a majority decision for James DeGale for me. This is Champions of Champions Boxing Talk. I'm out, brother.